What's up, everybody? It's Dan, Binder Boneyard, coming at you from the office. It is the first part of April, and it is still perpetual winter here. Snowed this morning. It's cold. You probably hear the heater running. Yeah. Anytime that winter wants to transition into spring or even summer, I would be okay with that. But anyway, I appreciate everyone listening, Patreon donators, and everyone that, social media subscribers. All that stuff is all super helpful. Very grateful. Appreciate you guys very much. I don't charge for this. It is a free podcast. All I ask is that you tell people and, spread the word that there is an informative and mildly entertaining podcast that's international specific. And if you do want to donate, you can head over to the Patreon page, Binder Boneyard Podcast at Patreon, and, donate $1 a month or whatever you feel like. The subscription over on Instagram, if you want the exclusive Instagram content, is it's $3 a month. And every little bit helps. And so I appreciate you guys very much. And just keep cranking these things out. This one is going to be story time. If you've been following along on the gram, I had been working a deal for a while now, and I finally acquired a massive parts collection out of Southern California. And it was 3 semi-truck trailers full of dealership parts, takeoffs, and not just IH. There's tons of Ford and Mopar and Chevy NOS parts in the box. This old man had been buying up dealerships and going to auctions and buying leftover stock and whatnot, and and not just international, but all the makes. And so unfortunately I had to buy it all. He wouldn't just let me high grade the IH parts out of there. I had to take it all. So it was a serious undertaking. We were only able to empty out 2 of the 3 trailers that are there, so we'll have to go back for the 3rd. But anyway, this whole podcast is just going to be about the process and how it all happened and some of that sort of stuff. But on a side note, been on a very restrictive diet since the 1st of February. Josie had to go in for just some stomach stuff and whatever, and the doctor put her on a extremely restrictive, no sugar, no grains, no carbs, no hardly anything diet to help her start over with her stomach. And I also did the diet just out of support with her, because I know how hard it is when you're around people that don't give a crap about what you're going through, and then so you're trying to be good, and it's really hard to be in that environment. So I just went along with the diet to make it easy. So and this means like no fruit. The only fruit that was allowed was like berries, and even then it was like blueberries and raspberries. Is it? And you can only have them in the morning. So kind of imagine, like if it was the 1800s, it's that kind of thing, not a lot of sugar, nothing like that. So tons of meat, green vegetables, no fruit, a lot of nuts and seeds, but no peanuts or things like that. But anyway, I've dropped about 20 pounds now in about 5 weeks. So, which has been good and bad, because this thing it's a tough diet to be on. And then when you go on the road, it becomes even tougher, because truck stops and convenience stores and restaurants, you can't go to a restaurant and eat because there's nothing on the menu that you can eat. And so this whole clean out coupled with this diet was very tough. There were some days where, all I had was eggs and nuts. That was it. So anyway, the one thing I did, my cheat or my guilty pleasure is the Monster. I just can't, sugar-free Monster. So it kind of falls into the thing, but there's chemicals in there that, I shouldn't be having. But anyway, that was my one thing I couldn't give up, was the energy drink. But anyway, Josie's been doing very good. Her stomach is coming around, and all that's clearing up. And so that just added another layer to this whole adventure. That's kind of why I brought it up, just to, set the tone. But, I have, my enclosed trailer is 28 feet. It's 14,000 pound rated. And so I knew that I could haul quite a bit of stuff back from this collection. And, the typical collection is these old guys, they don't throw anything away. And we're all guilty of it. And this guy was no exception. There were some bolt bins, which I'm madly in love with. They're these antique steel bolt bins. And they were full of semi-truck lug nuts and semi-truck wheel studs and semi-truck U-bolts and just tons and tons of hardware that we can't use and I'm not bringing home. So we ended up hauling in over 5,000 pounds of scrap metal, and none of it was bigger than a coffee can. I take it back. There were some power tools that got scrapped. He had barrels of Black & Decker hand drills and skill saws and just bullshit, crappy tools that, they don't sell very well online. Most of them needed cords or some other repair, and they just weren't worth it. And that was the thing. I had to justify this haul by sorting out what was money makers and what was, that had potential, and then what was just garbage. And so we ended up hauling in over 5,000 pounds in nuts and bolts, pretty much. And then ended up taking in just under 2,000 pounds of trash, just plain old garbage, empty boxes. Because as we go through this stuff, because there was parts and stuff in like Apple crates and old liquor store boxes and, plastic tire chain boxes that were 40 years old and just disintegrated as soon as you touched them. And so there was a fair amount of garbage. So we ended up taking in, just under 2,000 pounds worth of trash that couldn't come home. And even some of the stuff we brought home is going to it's questionable. But, I erred on the side of saving it just because. But, so I knew what we were going to run into in this trip. So when we started prepping for it, got the enclosed trailer cleaned out. It's pretty much ready to go all the time. We grabbed every strap we had. We threw in, dozens and dozens of cardboard boxes and plastic totes and things that we have left over here. And because when we go to shows, we put a lot of that stuff in those totes, and it just makes for easier transporting. But so we got that cleaned out, got the black truck in for maintenance. Did fluid change on the rear end and filter change on the transmission. Added a new transmission cooler since the last one had ruptured during the King of the Hammers trip. And then also the oil seal leak on the front crank. I had Steve pull the front end off and redo that seal. While it was apart, we took care of some hose chafing and rerouted a few things to make it a little more trouble-free in the future. I'm happy with how the truck has done the last year and a half, but there were some things that, looking at how it wore, like the power steering, one of the power steering hoses was resting on the intake boot right at the turbo or near the turbo. And when we started working on it, you move that hose out of the way and there's a divot worn into the intake boot. And so you knew that it was only a matter of time before that hose was going to wear through and the turbo was just going to start sucking dirty air through that hole. So we rerouted some lines, replaced some worn parts, and just generally got the black truck ready for the trip. The other thing that we did on this haul was I delivered a 54 panel to a buyer in Northern California. We had a 54 in the yard. 53 in the yard. That was a parts truck that we just hadn't got to parting out yet. And this guy called and he wanted the whole thing. And so I made him a deal on the whole thing. And we delivered it on our way down, which was helpful because that was money that went towards the purchase of all the parts. This was extremely expensive endeavor between housing, because we rented a house for a whole week. We had 2 trucks because not only did I take the black truck with the enclosed trailer, we also had the Cowboy Dodge with my flatbed, my 20-foot flatbed that was on that, because part of this collection was not only the 3 trailers, there was also a 73 1310 Camper Special 2-wheel drive truck that was part of the deal. So I knew that we were going to put the truck on the flatbed and then fill it with stuff, and so yeah, that was just part of the deal. So after service on the black truck, if you've seen anything on social media, you've probably saw that we painted the truck. It's got an orange block now with the TransStar Eagle decal that we put on there. TransStars were international semi-trucks, and then the Eagle was in the late 70s. They had offered the Broham Eagle package, and this Eagle looked super cool, and so I had a vinyl shop resize it to fit the side of the black truck, and it came out amazing. Everybody likes it. It gets a lot of attention. I'm stoked with it. So I did apply the Eagle and then got her out of the shop. The Dodge got full service, oil change, trans oil, T-case oil, rear end, full greasing, air filter, fuel filter, what else? Just a general cleanup. It has brand new tires on it. All new front brakes, rotors, and pads. Packed the bearings, did all that stuff. Just prepping for a serious adventure. So Dodge was ready to go. I had to put a new tire on the flatbed trailer, and it was ready to go. So started the drive down. Josie and I left on Saturday just because we knew we were going to have to deliver the panel. Stayed in Stockton, California. I don't recommend. Just in general, I'm sorry if you live there, but you know what I'm talking about. Delivered the panel to Murphy's, California, which is up in the hills on some seriously winding, narrow country roads. Again, not fun to tow on, and it was definitely a workout for the truck getting up there. But made it up there, no problem. And then after we delivered that, then made the drive down to Hesperia to the rental house. So that was us. And then Steve and Ethan, they left on Sunday morning, bright and early. And they made the drive in one shot from the shop here in Terrebonne all the way to Hesperia. What's funny about the Dodge is it gets amazing economy when it's empty. Even pulling the trailer, which weighs like 3,500 pounds, there's no wind drag. So, 70 miles an hour is like $2,000, I think, in that truck, because the speedometer doesn't work. Like all Dodges, the speedometer is broken. And Steve was able to make it from Central Oregon to Hesperia, which I don't know the full mileage. It's like 1,100 miles or something, on 3 tanks of diesel. Like just under $300 to drive pretty much the whole length of the country, which is, pretty funny. I'm not so lucky because the enclosed trailer is a giant parachute and it's always just under a load. So I averaged, I had to do the drive, towing, and out of the stuff. I ended up getting 5 tanks of diesel to go from Terrebonne to Hesperia. But running around empty, the black truck gets pretty nice, pretty good mileage, right around 20, 18, 19, depending on terrain and how hard I drive it. But you can always count on the cowboy truck getting consistently like 20 to 22 when it's empty. But anyway, so the guys met us down there at the house on Sunday night. I took a risk on the Airbnb because sometimes you just don't know what you're getting. And this it wasn't the best. The house was kind of dirty, it's falling apart. Over $1,000 to stay there for the week. And, it was missing utensils. There was no soap for the dishwasher. There was just stuff like that you really hope that by renting a house, you would have to not worry about. But yet there I was, hand washing all the dishes because there was no detergent. And I didn't want to go out and buy some and then leave it there because, I'm spiteful like that. But, there was no friggin' spatula. I was trying to make eggs in the dang frying pan and I had no way to turn the eggs. And I'm not cool enough to just flip them like with the pan. So I'm trying to flip a stupid egg with like a putty knife. And yeah, it was the breakfast was always irritating. But anyway, the house, it was better than a hotel for sure. It was nice having a place to go back to and relax. But so the loadout was definitely a challenge, just all the parts and stuff, and it was just so overwhelming. It's just stuff everywhere. And you start going through it, and it was like a treasure hunt. You'd have 8 or 10 boxes of point sets from Napa, and old Eklund Napa boxes, and then there'd be one IH box, and you'd open it up, and it would be, a point set or a brake wheel cylinder rebuild kit, or there was some boxes we found of original bearings still in the tins, because IH used to do their bearings in these round tins that looked like mint tins or something, shoe polish tins. And so it was neat. You'd uncover something and it would just be like a treasure hunt all the time. And there wasn't ever just one of something. It was always, multiple batches of things. When it came to wearables, there were entire drawers in filing cabinets of nothing but distributor caps. There were drawers and drawers of horn buttons. I bet you there's 150 horn buttons that we pulled out of there, and ranging from years from early 50s to S series medium duty trucks. Just horn buttons galore. Mirrors, hundreds and hundreds of mirrors. So you're going to start seeing a lot of that stuff filter onto the website here real soon. So yeah, keep your eye out for that. Some NOS, some used. But we just started loading, we put some of the shelving that was in there. Once the shelf got empty, we put into my trailer and we would lay it down flat on the floor. And then we would fill the spaces with the boxes that we were making of all the fragile parts and, throwing away what was bad and the garbage and whatnot. And then, reboxing what was good. Josie was wrapping everything in paper and putting it in boxes. And we would put it in those spaces in the shelf. And then we could lay another shelf on top of them and fill it with boxes again. And then that was how we were able to pack so much stuff in there and keep it safe, and kind of segregate things. Because there were loose turbos and there's probably 50 carburetors. And so stuff like that wasn't going in boxes. Those were just going loose in the trailer. So there's a whole section in one of the shelves of nothing but carburetors. And so, yeah, we had to load really carefully. There were a bunch of toolboxes full of tools. Probably one of the biggest wrenches I've ever seen in my life was in there. There was an entire proto tool set that started. The biggest size was 4-inch and went down to, I think the smallest proto wrench I saw on the set was 3/4. So just massive tools, a lot of big truck stuff, probably 50 air brake cylinders, this guy just bought everything, trucking companies that went out of business or were going out. He would come in and buy all of their inventory and resell it. And, he wouldn't have had all this stuff if he'd figured out how the internet worked 20 years ago. But, he was one of these guys that thought the internet was going to be a fad and only sold in person and never had a website, nothing like that. Just did everything old school. And that's how you end up with what you end up. So, yeah, just continued to load. The guys did great sorting stuff out. We found a bunch, more tools, old Wilton vices, a lot of name brand stuff, some literature that was super cool. I've been sharing on my Instagram stories. If you check those out, it's just kind of neat. I love that old stuff. And so I like to put it out there for everybody to see. A lot of international manuals and MT books and XP books. So those will be handy in the shop for sure. Because, man, we're going to have a ton of parts that we have to decipher what they are. Because you've got a part number and the tag is disintegrating and you can't read anything about it other than the number. And you need the book to figure out what it goes to. So that's what the XP books are for. You find the number in the XP book, and then the XP book tells you what MT book it's in. So then you go to the MT book, and then you find what page it's on, and then you can go right to the page, and it'll say washer, or whatever it is. So it's just such a time-consuming way to do it. I wish that, like I said, if I was Oprah rich, I would scan every XP book and put it in a database, and then every MT book, and then that way you could digitally search every part and it would be available at your fingertips, essentially, instead of this backwards way of having to reverse engineer the part number. So, but yeah, we loaded up, filled the back of the 1310 with all the sheet metal parts, because there were fenders and doors, tailgates, and a lot of parts like that. Put the 1310 on the flatbed and loaded out what we could. Like I said, we only emptied out 2 of the 3 trailers, so we have to go back for the 3rd trailer. But we rolled out of there on Friday morning, Friday about noon. is when we left their house, started our way north. I was heavy, really heavy, and I was having problems with the brakes. The trailer brakes were good. The truck brakes normally were great, especially with the Hydro Boost and the 1-ton stuff. But for some reason, I just didn't feel like I had any brakes. And so after about 40 miles, we pulled over, and I jacked up the rear end of the black truck and spun the wheels and noticed that the rear shoes were way out of adjustment. And, normally they adjust when you either set the parking brake or when you back up, they click into place when they engage. Well, the black truck spends 95% of its time going forwards. So if you wear off the brakes going forward, then the adjustment doesn't really work when you're going backwards. So I ended up putting about 30 clicks on the adjusters for the rear drums, and that solved my brake problem because, they just weren't working before. And while we were stopped, Steve was like, hey, we got a nail in this other trailer tire. So while I was working on the brakes, they ended up changing the tire on the flatbed because it had a nail in it. So then we hit the road again and just fought stupid California traffic all the way. Ended up staying in Redding on Friday night because I didn't want to drive all the way home. First of all, I couldn't make it all the way home. And second, the weather is terrible. The forecast was snow and ice and all that sort of stuff from, weed all the way home. And I did not want to make that drive in the dark. So we stayed in Redding, checked everything out. Everything was good. Truck's doing good. Get going on Saturday morning and start making our way. And sure enough, we get halfway up the mountain, up Shasta, and starts snowing. And it snowed all the way to Weed, where I met a scout guy, Dylan. We'll talk about that later, or you'll see that on social media. But met Dylan, and then continued on from Weed to Klamath Falls and into Oregon, and it just snowed the whole time, and it would stick and then it wouldn't stick, and it was just blowing the trailer around, and the truck was already working hard. I was going through diesel like crazy because I was pretty much full throttle all the time. The truck will do 75 loaded, like that's not a problem. It's just getting going. All the stop and go California traffic was just like, it just would eat the fuel up because I was always on it. And that Allison is great. That Allison shifts good and the converter lockup does what it's supposed to, but it's still, just like constantly eating fuel. Well, we hit the scales outside of Bend just to see because I was curious. And I was right. We scaled at 26,350 pounds. And that's about 4,000 pounds more than I should have had. That means that there was 14,000 pounds of stuff in the trailer, which I'm still trying to wrap my head around that. But there was 14,000 pounds. Steve scaled the Dodge with the pickup and all that. It was like 18,000 for the gross on that one. And he was doing fine. He was having to fill up every other fill up from me. Which there's two reasons. My tank's only 22 gallons or 23 gallons, and his is 26 gallons. So he had a little bit more range, and he was behind me the whole time, and he was close. There was a lot of times I looked in my mirror and I didn't see him at all, and I thought he was gone or whatever, and then I would see the very tail of his trailer, and so I was cutting the wind for him, and and he was towing less weight. So yeah, I think, and like I said, he's got the manual transmission and different gearing. So it's just a little different all around. But I'm not sure how much the cowboy truck would have enjoyed the weight. I mean, it would have pulled it. I'm sure I've pulled that before with other things, but I just know that it doesn't, when you start adding on the weight like that, the mileage does go down. I think he ended up getting around 12 to 13 loaded coming home, and I was around 9 to 10, just depending on what was going on. But anyway, so that was the trip. That was the adventure. We didn't have really any trouble other than the brake adjustment. I did blow the heater. So the heater fan in the pickup in the black truck let go, and would blow a fuse. It was jammed up or something. It just failed. So we didn't have any heat in the black truck, but with the vent open, once you get going, the air just moving through the core on its own would heat the cab, pretty well. I was actually surprised how warm we stayed just going down the road. And it was California, so the average daytime temperature was 50 something. So it wasn't bad. And even coming through Oregon when it was snowing and 30, the truck was good and warmed up, and going with the the air blowing through the heater, it kept the cab warm. So it wasn't too bad. But that is something I need to address before next winter anyways. As far as the Dodge goes, no problems there. It did fine. I'm waiting for the driver door to fall off on it because it's just falling apart. But that's what Dodges do. They just fall apart. So that was the adventure. It was stressful. If anybody's curious, it ended up costing $20,000 for all the parts. And that included the 3 semi-trailers and the truck and the stuff that was in the shed. So I did have to sell my Metro. I sold a motorhome, and I sold a Scout that I had to pay for this deal. I'm sad the Metro's going away. It's probably the nicest Metro I'll ever have. But this deal was more important in the long run, I think. A little bit less selfish. I could have kept the Metro and whatever, but through the sale of those things, plus some generous offerings from several customers who were working on their trucks, so they prepaid for something or whatever. It was all very helpful, and that's how I was able to scrape up the money like I did, because I don't just have $20,000 laying around. And then I have yet to add up what the fuel costs were. I know the hotel was like $1,000, or the room like around $1,000, but I don't know what some of the other expenses are, like the food and the travel. But I do know that on this trip I did lose another 3 pounds, so I'm about back down to my fighting weight back when I was doing jiu-jitsu tournaments. But so anyway, that was the trip. I appreciate you guys for following along. Hopefully you check out the store when we start putting the stuff up and find something you want there. But anyways, until next time, I am Dan from Binder Boneyard.